I've already done 2 shorts on both my primary and secondary channels. Please go and check them out, and comment, like, and share if it pleases you to do so, or even if it doesn't. One of them was about boomer dads, or sons who call their fathers boomer dads. And the other one, I think it was facts and logic. It's my usual shtick, but packaged in a slightly different way, I suppose. Only 3 minutes long, and and I guess more likely for you to listen to it from beginning to end. I feel there's a lot that goes on online and in my head that doesn't fully get expressed in a more digestible form, but really they are just repetitions of the variations on the same theme, I should say. I saw on one of my on my Facebook feed. It's actually in Latin, and I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend that I can remember all my Latin and translate it perfectly just by reading it. But it's always fun to see how much Latin I've forgotten, or how much Latin I never learned. Looking at a cartoon and the word bubbles in Latin, working it out. Sometimes you get it right, and sometimes there are enough clues in the words to and the cartoon to get make you get the gist of it. And this one said, with a cartoon of a Roman in a tightrope carrying, I think one. Let me just see it again, because it's quite funny. He's carrying a stick, and on one end is a bucket full of hearts, and on the other, it's, what was it that he was carrying, that was meant to be logic. I forget what the other bucket was. So the the translation was, we are we go through life through trying to work out the fine balance between what we know and what we feel. And I thought that was very wise. And what I like about it is well, it's true. Sorry. So one is a bucket of hearts, and the other's a bucket of brains. And the translation is, life is a tightrope between what we feel and between that which we feel and that which we know. And the translator said it might have been something Seneca could have written, but it doesn't say who. So it goes: Vita est funis tentus inter id quod sentimus et id quod scimus. Just showing off. So most of us don't get it right. I'm not claiming I've got it right. But when we get it wrong, we're supposed to learn from it, and we hope that there are people around us who understand us enough and care about us enough to tell us when we've gone wrong, and they might do that if we don't call them names. and we would understandably not wish to be called names when we're just giving a friendly warning, well meant advice. But what if it comes from our own flesh and blood? Do we still do it? And liberal parents don't, right? They say things, let them make their own mistakes, which seems a height of irresponsibility to me, since we've only got one life. YOLO, as the atheists say. It seems to me that it is people whom you would expect to value life because YOLO, because that's what they believe. They believe in the god of YOLO, that they would value life more than they do. But it is the atheists who kill themselves. It is atheist parents who expect their children to make their own mistakes and destroy their own lives and hate their parents. But the phenomenon of different generations of men related to each other by being father and son are incapable of communicating with each other. What's wrong with them? And I think it's because a, a younger generation do not respect their fathers. Many of them have not met their fathers, or if they know who their fathers are, they are estranged from them. So, well, that's the impression I get. What do I know? But I do get a lot of Zoomers who speak with about their boomer dads with a certain edge of contempt. And various people I've spoken to online seem to be confirming this. Oh, I couldn't discuss politics with my parents, my mother, whatever. So it's obviously a problem of communication, but perhaps it's because adults themselves don't discuss it anymore. Because if a bunch of boomers regularly got together and discussed politics within the hearing of the young, it's only a matter of time before the young join them and discuss things, surely. But then nobody has these extended family gatherings anymore. And so they go online to hurl sticks and stones at each other. But the number of Zoomers who talk about their boomer dads with this edge of contempt and dismissiveness is interesting. Are any of you Zoomers in the chat? Do you talk to your father? Does your father talk to you? Or have you given up talking? I don't know. I know E. Michael Jones said, well, he commented on being mocked by one of his listeners as a boomer, and he asked why. He asked whether he could help being born in the generation that he was born in. And it seemed a very unkind and unfair form of discrimination, since none of us asked to be born and none of us chose the country in which we were born or the parents we were born of. Perhaps it is the corruption of the discourse that nobody can discuss politics without using some weapon word against the other. And since to be accused of being a fascist, racist, misogynist is the worst possible thing to be accused of. I guess it would have the same degree of um, malice or gravity of being called a traitor or a heretic in the olden days. But this is a phenomenon I would like to get to the bottom of. And so I guess I have to talk to more boomers who may or may not have noticed this phenomenon, and then I'll ask them if they ever attempt to discuss politics with their Zoomer children and what kind of response they get when they try to discuss politics with their Zoomer children. Do their Zoomer children call them names such as fascist, misogynist, racist, and anything like that they might have learnt at school or at university? They will have a wider vocabulary of weapon words if they've been to university, being more deeply indoctrinated. And then we'll have to discuss the difference between indoctrination and induction. This was something Chris Howard was talking about yesterday. I talked to a wide range of people, different religious groups, different generations, mostly to men, actually. I don't think women are interested in what I say because I suppose they're not getting the short end of the stick. But then it's probably because none of the topics that I discuss are of interest to them. And they, of all people, are the most sheeple like. They are the most conformist. And if you want to break your society out of any form of conformity, it's a job for a man, isn't it? It really is a job for a man. Simply because of the operation of gender roles. Women do not. Women are risk averse because it doesn't pay them to take risks. And, if they sit there and look pretty, eventually an offer of sex or marriage will come. If they are of childbearing age, and even if they're not of childbearing age. But for men, they can't just sit there and try to look pretty and hope for an offer of sex from some potential sex partner. They have to go out and do things, and I don't think they want to do it. They seem to expect things to fall into their lap, and it doesn't look like their boomer dads have been telling them any different. But it's part of liberal parenting, isn't it? To be negligent, to be absent or indifferent. And so their children hate them and despise them. And the generations of men cannot even get it together to discuss politics. And therefore no advice is given to the social retards who want to enter politics. And they enter without connections, without self awareness, without political awareness. And if that were not bad enough, they're not interested in facts and logic either. So basically, these men think like women. They behave in a reckless way, or they will not act at all. and then get themselves into trouble and then blame the Jews. I think this is pretty much a very established pattern of behavior. But facts and logic are a survival strategy, or used to be. But then we are in the final days of the Western Empire, when it is beginning to be realized that Christianity is kaput, and is so kaput that its replacement of liberalism is also kaput. So, what comes next? You would have thought that, well, I thought people would agree with me because they really haven't got a better argument, a better prediction. Well, what's going to happen? I suppose, well, a lot of them want a Mad Max society. But, well, let's have a best case scenario that the West corrects itself and there is no economic or civilizational collapse. It would, of course, entail a change of heart and a confession of error. But I don't see where that's coming from because people are still into representative democracy. They still want to keep voting. It's almost Aztec like, you know. I'm sure the Aztecs sacrificed more people the more anxious they became. And you can tell that we were having all these elections and they're not working. The voters still hate their ruling classes. So I think the problem is we're just in this revolving door of hatred and fear and thinking voting is going to solve their problems. And blaming their Zoomer dads. Sorry, their boomer dads. The Zoomers are blaming their boomer dads. So what did their parents do wrong? I suppose they're going to say, well, you had it better than us, Dad, and you left. You left the country. You will be leaving the country like an unflushed toilet. And you won't even admit that the swinging 60s, the sex revolution was the time in which you had your fun has ultimately caused this apparently irreversible degeneracy. But I'm an optimist. I believe that even as you head towards the edge of the cliff, there is, in theory, um, a possibility of doing a U-turn. What's the problem with doing a U-turn? It would be because, well, nobody's into facts and logic. They just want to create some stupid fantasy in their head and do their utmost to make it come true. Now, the same accusation could be leveled at me, but I'm someone who's very prepared to engage with anyone who disagrees with me. I wish more would, but they don't. So it seems that these people who don't agree with me assume that because something is improbable, there's no point discussing it. When what I hope for is that I'm just talking about the theory at this stage. Is my theory based on sound principles? Or are they or is it based on a false premise? And if so, which premise is false? This is what I'm trying to encourage people to consider, and they're not capable of doing it. All they want to do is, well, A, not discuss my idea, B, um, pretend I'm mad or evil or stupid without being able to say what I've said, without being able to cite anything that I've said that is untrue, illogical, or immoral. They just can't do it. So it seems that all around me are not capable of operating the engine of facts and logic, which is no harder than learning how to ride a bicycle. Even a child at primary school will be able to understand what I'm saying, but grown men can't or won't. 2 days ago, Caleb Morpin did a stream about Israel, and he was talking extensively about Zionism and how Israel has caused America problems. And I was saying in the chat that Israel is an American colony. I don't. Okay, if he said anything that refuted my claim, I didn't notice, but perhaps I wasn't listening properly. I do hope he will go and listen to that stream. Maybe I'll post a link so you can go and listen to him blow up at me twice. I mean, it's at 2.13 and 2.17. That actually, I even made a stream of. Well, it's only 5 minutes. The two outbursts. So you may wish to. You may wish to hear the original thing, or just go to my short version, which is, I think, on this channel. So you can do that and maybe work out what the problem is. So his entire premise is that Israel is causing America problems, and I'm saying that America is doing everything but just pretending that Israel is making us do it. And this means that the Jews are the fall guys. Again. But of course, those of you who've always had a theory that Jews are somehow responsible for all your ills will not be wanting to accept this narrative, because it would make you feel foolish to think that a group this, a group actually more stupid than you is controlling you. And there are many Jews whom you might be admired because they have a successful career in showbiz, or the arts and the legal profession, etc., etc. I mean, but then there will be successful members of different races and religions in the professions, in medicine, law, accountancy, that sort of thing. It's just that Jews get undue attention. Well, there will be successful Jews, middle class Jews, and religious Jews and secular Jews and poor Jews in prison, right? But I think it's the Gentile obsession with Jews. Well, it's a particularly, post, well, Christian or post-Christian. Well, it's European. It's a white people thing, um, and it's also kind of passed on to non-whites because a lot of Chinese people think Jews are like leprechauns and magic or something, and that they're a special kind of white people who are better than the average white person or something like that. But their behavior, I would suggest, has been um, credulous and foolish, in my view. So my theory is that they've just been, made to go. People, the colony of America, that is called Israel. Um, they are they are the focus of the hatred of Westerners who don't want to lift a finger to support Israel and resent being accused of being Nazis and anti Semites when they question Western foreign policy in the Middle East. And Jews, because they are being deliberately overprivileged, but that is to generate anti Semitism, um, and it is done with the purpose of um, using the anti Semitism thus generated as an excuse to remove the rights of Gentiles for self expression or political expression. So they are being set up as a fall guy. So, but of course, you can imagine any Jew thinking, well, of course, Israel is the Holy Land, and the story of Jews came from Israel, and that part of the world. Um, but you can also imagine any other people, landless people, like the Yazidis, like the Kurds. If you didn't have you know, any if you didn't have a homeland, you would want one, right? Whether you're a Jew or Gentile, of course you would want a homeland. I mean, go ask some Japanese or Indian or anyone really. Do you think your people deserve a homeland? Do you think they're going to say no? And if they already have a homeland, of course they're going to say yes, and we have it. And if they don't have one, they would say no, but we would like a homeland. But if you already have a homeland, if you're a Jew and you're living in Israel and have the unwavering support of the world's most powerful nation, why would you say that you don't deserve a homeland? Why would you even say that? It would seem ungrateful. But there is a way of getting around that. And I actually found it, and it was in a Jewish publication called Tablet Magazine, and with the title Allah is Zionist. And it quotes a verse in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 104. And I have been going round the Muslim channels asking them what it means, and they can't say what it means. They get angry with me, they stop me from commenting, they say something, but it's incoherent, and well, I can't understand it. I genuinely can't understand it. So that's why I keep going back, and then they can't stand it anymore, and they disable me from commenting. But it is true that Allah is Zionist because of that verse in chapter 17, verse 104, which says, in the end times, Jews are to go to Israel in a commingled crowd, meaning they are to share that land with Gentiles. So it doesn't matter, well, as long as they're Gentiles, that's the, you know, ballpark area of what Allah commanded. And actually, Hamas have sort of got the idea because one of their demands was that, I think it's Article 31 of the Hamas Charter, they said, um, we want Israel to be under Sharia. They actually said that. But, well, of course, nobody talks about that. So Hamas was basically saying, don't be so silly. We're not talking about exterminating Jews or non-Muslims. They can live here, but they would have to live under Sharia. And I think it's Article 31. So you may wish to go and look at it if you're interested, which probably you're not. And this leads me nicely to the point about the sheeple who don't care whom their government maims and murders in their name. They just don't care. And you can't make people care if they don't care. I mean, you can tell them that, if your government gets its foreign policy wrong, and by foreign policy, I mean military policy, meaning, starting wars that result in rebellion or invasion, such as the one Hitler started. Though I suppose you could say, well, I wasn't looking for a fight with, um, with Britain. But in the end, he did declare war on America, didn't he? But the point is, if your government gets its foreign policy wrong, it would end in invasion, in the invasion of a country, as the Germans discovered, and the suicide of their chancellor, or the regicide of Nicholas II, and of Russia and Louis XVI of France. So it's not exactly irrelevant foreign policy, but I know most ordinary people, they don't even understand their own history, and to be fair to them, a lot of them are not informed about their own history because, as you would expect, their government would be very anxious to hide their foreign policy mistakes from the people they govern. So it wasn't until long after I left school that actually I seem to remember my history teacher talking about the Berlin Baghdad Railway being the cause of World War One. And you can still find a Wikipedia entry to that effect. So it wasn't about Belgian neutrality. So when I learned European history as a schoolgirl, we had to learn all this stuff about the balance of power, the alliance system, the triple alliance, the um, dual alliance, the entente cordiale, um, the violation of Belgian neutrality being the operating cause for Britain's entry into World War One. And then later, I heard on this Muslim channel, there were these Muslims just casually talking. I forget the context now, and they said, yeah, the Berlin to Baghdad railway was what caused World War One. Woodrow Wilson certainly thought that, because Woodrow Wilson was about breaking up these European empires. And I think he was right in thinking that, you know, World War One was a war of imperial rivalry. There was no need for Britain to declare war on Germany because its interest, because it stood, Britain stood idly by in 1870 in the Franco-Prussian War when Prussia defeated Germany in the final war of German unification. Britain didn't do anything. There was the Paris Commune. The Parisians were forced to eat their dogs and rats when they were besieged. The British didn't lift a finger. So Woodrow Wilson, with his 14 points, was all about letting all the different countries of Europe, with their different shared histories and ethnicities and languages, they should organize themselves into little groups and be free of the empires that used to oppress them. Because the operating cause of World War One was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a Serbian terrorist, because the Serbs were unhappy with Austrian rule, and this provoked Russia to stick its oar in because it had ideas of pan-Slavism and Serbs were Slavs. But actually, those Slavs don't really get along when you think of the Poles and the Russians. So obviously, race cannot be your religion. But is it possible to find anyone with the requisite knowledge to discuss these things? Because I think the people who know don't want to discuss it because they want to, well, they would be in high places and they wouldn't want to admit the terrible errors of British foreign policy that has resulted in Europe becoming a US vassal state collectively as NATO and the EU. So I get it that the average person, even if he were properly informed of his history, would not be able to easily challenge the official narrative because we know that in Europe and in Australia, people are imprisoned for having the wrong view of World War Two. This is an outrage. If you consider yourself um, part of the free West, you would be angry and outraged. But all I get is indifference and a shrug of the shoulders. Even in America, I I suspect that Americans are no longer allowed to win any legal action if they have the wrong view of World War Two, because judicial notice has been taken that the Holocaust did happen, and this means that the court is obliged to assume it is true, and this is um, this is the result of a case between a legal action between um, the Institute of Historical Review and a Jew called Merle Mermelstein, who said that his testimony that he was a Holocaust survivor or that his parents were sufficient evidence to constituted conclusive evidence that the Holocaust happened, and he claimed he wanted to claim his prize from the Institute of Historical Review, and they said no, and it was taken to court, and the Institute of Historical Review lost. So, although Americans might think they have, the right to deny the Holocaust, I don't think it has been tested. But the whole point is that what happened after Britain lost the Palestine Mandate was that all the imperial possessions of the Europeans just passed to America. They just went, or America just acquired them on a platter, so to speak. And this was made very clear during the Suez Crisis when Britain and France invaded Egypt, when the Egyptian president, what was his name? It wasn't Sadat who was assassinated. It was, well, the other one. I can't remember his name. He nationalised the Suez Canal, and this outraged Britain and France so much they invaded Egypt, and America told them to leave, or else, and they left. They withdrew. So, so that was when we really, well, that was the first sign of American hegemony and European withdrawal. And then the next war was the Korean War, which divided Korea into North and South, and then the Vietnam War. That was the beginning of America asserting imperial dominance all over the world. And now it is the global hegemon. And it is unimaginable that Israel, this little country, actually controls America. Of course, it must be the other way around, but for some reason, Caleb Morpin cannot accept this. I'd be happy to argue with him about it, but I suspect he won't be doing that. But there are other political commentators who do subscribe to this view. And I hope to be speaking to them. The most well known is Brian Boletic, and I believe Alexander Mackay of Liberation News on YouTube. He has that view too. So I'm not completely alone in this. And when people talk about Israel having nukes, I'm sure they were supplied and tested in America and delivered by an American delivery service. Surely. So why do so many people find it so hard to believe that the Jews are in fact the dupes of Uncle Sam? I think it's simply because they want to outsource. They want to outsource the horrors of imperialism to the eternal scapegoat who are the Jews. Not that Jews, well, but then the irony of it is that scapegoating is a Jewish idea. It's a Jewish practice. You can find it in the Old Testament, talking about them, getting a goat to represent their sins and getting it to wander off into the wilderness and off a cliff or something. And and then when they moved to America, to New York particularly, and they couldn't find, well, they couldn't do that anymore, obviously. Well, not that they did when they were in Europe. They they had they started a new tradition called kaporot, which is waving a chicken over their heads, um, and then killing it. And it is only called, provoked anti-Semitism when they left the dead chickens and didn't clean it up and didn't even try to make it, well, to butcher it properly, obviously. And well, it's a difficult thing to do if you're used to getting your chicken from a supermarket already butchered and you know neatly carved into breast fillets or whatever. Well, the process of rendering a chicken is rather laborious and alarming. If you've ever been to a wet market, I mean, I've seen the process. So the housewife would go to the chicken seller, choose chicken, and with the idea that it will be all prepared for her when she finishes other shopping. So the chicken would be plunged into hot water to, well, after having its throat slit, to um to get to make the feathers come off easily, and then of course it had to be gutted and then cut, cut into, well, not even cut into pieces. Um, but I suppose if you wanted, just thighs or drumsticks or whatever, you could ask for this. Um, but yes, it's a laborious and smelly and alarming process if you're not used to butchering animals. And but anyway, my point is that Jews are a credulous people who are easily manipulated by the cunning of Uncle Sam. That is really what I'm saying. And for all those people who want to blame Jews for their terrible Western foreign policy, yes, they have a convenient scapegoat, but I think the guilt is on both sides. So these Americans who turn up their noses at Tucker Carlson and think, oh, we're not the sort of people who talk about Tucker Carlson. We never watched Fox News. They are the people who are willfully blind and willfully deaf. There are none so blind as those who will not see, or so deaf as those who will not hear. They can just use their class thing and say, we're not the sort of people who talk about these things. Why do they take that attitude? It's really a class war, isn't it? The people who pretend not to see, who affect not to understand, will be the people who think they're doing well, that they're so above the common herd that they just can't imagine themselves being trailer trash, people complaining about the government, worried about how they're going to get to the end of the month, or they're not to know, they don't understand. And obviously, these people are angry that all this money is being spent on Israel when it could be spent on them, when they perceive Jews to be so affluent and so successful. Yes, of course, they would be angry, but the coastal elites will affect not to see the problem. And this class distinction is more important to their identity than anything else in the world, really. And that's why they just cling to their Christianity as a way of clinging to their middle class status. And that is the only purpose of Christianity in America. And it is frankly disgusting, isn't it? It is disgusting. And the truth is, these Christians, well, they don't care about their fellow Americans. They don't. Do they even care about their fellow Christians? I don't think so. But back to Caleb Morpin, who affects not to understand what I'm saying, when I expected he, of all people, to know what I'm talking about. Maybe he hasn't read the farewell speech of George Washington. Maybe he doesn't know that Washington warned against political parties, or maybe he does, because I've tried to say it. I think I've been clear enough. I'm sure I sent him that link on the American Majority website, which gives a very clear and brief summary of why Washington disapproved of political parties. But I think I know the reason. I think he just doesn't want to step over the edge. He doesn't want to be accused of rejecting representative democracy. And he doesn't want to argue about it. Or maybe he does. I hope he does. And I think he wants to stay on the good side of Christians because a lot of his CPI members are Christian. And he complained about me going on about the Trinity because I know. I know the Trinity is morally and intellectually indefensible. And I also know that Christianity is only a cultural affiliation. These American Christians might as well be wearing the team colors of their football team. And as for their fond beliefs that thinking of Jesus and Mary is going to get them to heaven, well, how would they know? How would they know whether any of their ancestors got to heaven? Even now, there's a controversy about what happens to dead people. So Muslims think, I think both Jews and Muslims think that people lie in their graves and are revived during the end times. Well, that's a Jewish belief too, but then Jews also believe in reincarnation. So I'm not really clear. I don't think anybody is clear whether reincarnation is supposed to take place. My theory of the afterlife is that it does take place because it seems a bit harsh on Christians, that they would be, all going to hell because they were guilty of the mortal sin of idolatry. And I think a compassionate God would give them another chance and say, look, Christian, now that you know that I'm not Jesus, you must also know that you are guilty of a mortal sin if you worship the Trinity as you were commanded to by your absolute monarch. So I'll give you another chance. What religion would you choose for your next life? What religion for your parents would you choose for your next life? And I'm absolutely certain, though of course I can't prove it, that there will be these Christians who will say, I'll have to choose Christian again. Because I actually know an academic who said he would. He's Catholic, and he said, well, my Catholic identity is so important that even if I knew that Jesus isn't God? Because this was the hypothetical question I posed to him. I said, imagine yourself having died and met God and realized he's not Jesus. And he, in his compassion, has given you another life so that you can get to heaven. What religion would you choose? And he said, Catholicism. So, it's not the kind of mistake that, only stupid people would make. So I suppose you would get this reincarnation happening for people who didn't quite get it right the first time, maybe more times than twice. And I suppose it will be a kind of musical chair situation where, um, well, at some point the music stops and the game ends. Finally. And it would be when when the Messiah comes and when the end times are here. So so I guess in the meantime there will be the theoretical chance of having another go at getting to heaven if you didn't manage it first time. Particularly if your parents were born, Hindu or Buddhist or Christian, and and all I'm asking people is to ask themselves, well, if if you were given another chance after realizing that God is not Jesus, and you wanted to get to heaven ASAP, what religion would you choose? Are you going to choose Hinduism? Are you going to choose Buddhism? Because basically, Hinduism and Buddhism believe in reincarnation, and you can't choose those because it means that you're not thinking of getting to heaven ASAP, and you already know Christianity is wrong. You're going to choose Judaism. If you're going to choose Judaism, I would have to remind you that there are 36 capital offenses and no mention of heaven at all in the Torah. And any mention of heaven is in the Talmud, and um, these are purely the speculation of the sages of the ages. So there's no divine authority for reincarnation. They can only um, deduce that reincarnation must be allowed if people are allowed more than one go to get to heaven. So if you think of it as a game, um, you will. I don't think you can rationally choose Judaism because if you're going to take the whole thing seriously, there are 36 capital offenses in Judaism, and Jews have already, or rabbis have already been known to say that if you're not punished with the 36 capital offenses in your Jewish lifetime when you have committed them, they will be waiting for you in the next life. And so I guess what will happen is if you've accumulated, say, 36 capital offenses, just say you're a very bad Jew and you broke the Sabbath, you committed adultery, you committed sodomy, uh, all the other ones, adding up to 36. One of the more interesting ones was being a citizen of a city that has gone astray. And then you have to think of all these Jews who live in Christendom and who died citizens of these cathedral cities or, well, modern cities even. of countries that still consider themselves officially Christian, such as Britain, and this would include Jews in Australia and Canada and New Zealand, who are under the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth, then this includes a lot of Jews who are citizens of cities that have gone astray. And so, the punishment for being a city or citizen of a city that has gone astray is beheading. So, if you like to imagine all these Jews in their afterlives being beheaded and burnt and strangled and stoned for the 36 capital offences that they committed in their Jewish lifetimes, then I don't think you would be envying Jews, would you? So I'm saying the obvious. The obvious religion to choose if you want to get to heaven ASAP must be Islam. Are you really going to argue with me about that? Jews and Gentiles?